The photograph hung crooked in the hallway, but no one dared straighten it. Ever since Grandma Rose left, nothing felt upright. Not the picture frames. Not the family dinners. Not even the air inside the house. The Caldwell house stood proudly on a quiet suburban street in Connecticut, painted in tasteful shades of cream and slate blue. From the outside, it looked like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. But inside, beneath the polished wood floors and neatly fluffed cushions, something unspoken festered. Grandma Rose used to say the house felt too quiet, too perfect, like it didn't have any memories soaked into the walls. A real home creaks when it breathes, she would joke. No one ever laughed. Now in her late 70s, Grandma Rose moved slowly, with a cane in one hand and sharpness in her eyes that hadn't dulled despite her body's betrayal. She still cooked Sunday breakfast. She still remembered every grandchild's birthday. But lately, she also misplaced her keys, forgot what month it was, and once set the kettle to boil without water. Her daughter Lydia noticed. And resented it. At 43, Lydia was all clipped tones and tightly coiled hair. She worked as an assistant director at a marketing firm downtown, and ran the household like a campaign. Every schedule printed, every pantry labeled. Her husband Marcus, an insurance adjuster with a fondness for black coffee and silence, rarely looked up from his phone unless someone broke a rule. Their children, Tina, 16, and Marco, 12, orbited the house like cautious satellites. Tina wore headphones constantly. Marco preferred the attic. The family sat down to dinner that Friday evening, as they did every week. The table was laid neatly, rosemary chicken, asparagus, Lydia's signature red wine reduction. Rose always noticed the presentation. She'd raised Lydia to have taste, even if it came with a side of bitterness. "Pass the bread, Grandma?" Marco asked gently. Rose smiled, grateful. She had been quiet most of the evening, distracted by something. She looked toward the ceiling, then at Lydia. "Do you remember that chest in the attic?" she asked softly. Lydia stiffened. "It belonged to your father," Rose continued. "There's something in it I need to show you all. It's important." Marcus rolled his eyes. "Rose, not this again." "No, listen," she insisted, her eyes clearer than they had been in days. "There's something you need to see. Something I promised to protect." Lydia put her fork down with a sharp clink. "Can we not do this right now?" "But it's time." "No, Mom. It's not." Lydia's voice sharpened, slicing through the room like a cold blade. "You're confusing stories again. There's nothing in that attic except dust and broken furniture." The silence that followed was thick and raw. "I'm not confused," Rose whispered. "I remember everything about that day. I remember the sound of the latch. I remember what he said to me before." "Enough." Lydia snapped. Tina flinched. Marco stared down at his plate. Rose's hands trembled slightly in her lap. Her eyes welled, but she didn't wipe them. She just stared across the table at Lydia, the daughter she had raised alone, through heartbreak and sacrifice. The same daughter who now looked at her like a child who'd grown senile in a rocking chair. Rose reached for her glass of water, held it midair, and then said, quiet but firm, "When I'm gone, you'll see why I had to keep it." The glass touched the table again with a soft clink. No one said a word. Only the crooked photograph in the hallway, tilted like a lopsided memory, bore silent witness to what had just cracked in that room. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She sat in the dark living room with the glow of the monitor still burned into her vision long after she turned it off, her son's smile etched behind her eyelids like a cruel engraving. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the caption, "Surrounded by everyone we love." The words churned in her chest, sour and heavy. Love was supposed to bind, not exclude. Yet she had been carved out of the circle like an afterthought. By morning, she forced herself to brew coffee, the smell bitter and hollow in the empty kitchen. She stirred it slowly, staring out the window at the world moving on without her. The Hendersons' dog barked. Children rode bikes down the street. The ordinary rhythm of the town mocked her as if nothing monumental had happened. But to Evelyn, everything had changed. She sat back down at the table and allowed herself to wander into memories, but this time they carried a sharper edge. She remembered Michael as a teenager slamming doors, telling her she was too strict, that other mothers let their kids breathe. She remembered the night he came home reeking of alcohol and she'd grounded him for a month, standing her ground even when he shouted that she was ruining his life. She remembered the desperate way she'd clung to him when he left for college, pressing money into his hand even when she couldn't afford it. And she remembered the first time he brought Vanessa home. Beautiful, polished, confident in a way Evelyn never was. Vanessa's handshake had been limp, her eyes scanning the modest house with faint disapproval. Over dinner, she'd corrected Michael twice in front of Evelyn, as if already assuming the role of authority. Evelyn had smiled politely, but in her chest she felt the first pang of a mother losing her place. Later that night, when she asked Michael gently if Vanessa was serious about him, his response had been sharp, "Don't start, Mom. You always find something wrong with people." Now, in the cruel clarity of hindsight, Evelyn wondered if her instinct had been right all along. Maybe Vanessa had been building a wall between them from the very beginning. The coffee went cold in her hands. She stood and wandered through the house, touching the artifacts of a life built around motherhood, Michael's football trophy still gleaming in the cabinet, his kindergarten drawings fading in cheap frames. Relics of devotion. She had sacrificed so much, poured everything she had into him, only to be left like an old coat discarded at the back of the closet. Her chest tightened with something heavier than sadness, shame. What would people think? That she had failed as a mother? That she was too controlling, too clingy, that her own son had chosen to cut her out? She could already imagine the whispers at church, the pitying looks. Evelyn Carter, the woman whose son got married without her even there. She sank back into her chair, clutching her own hands as if holding them together might keep her from unraveling. The more she tried to make sense of it, the less it made sense. How could love that deep be met with such rejection? How could she have been both everything to him and nothing at all? That afternoon, she forced herself to step outside for air. She walked down to the corner store for milk, her steps heavy. The cashier, a young man with freckles, smiled politely and asked how her day was. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no sound came. She realized she couldn't say the truth. She couldn't tell a stranger that her son had married without her, that she wasn't invited to the happiest day of his life. So she just smiled back weakly and whispered, "Fine. Just fine." When she returned home, she opened her phone again, unable to resist. New photos had been posted, Michael dancing with Vanessa, Vanessa tossing her bouquet, Michael laughing with his groomsmen, all evidence of a life she no longer had access to. Her stomach knotted, but then something inside her hardened. She could not keep watching from a distance. She needed to see for herself what kind of life her son was stepping into, even if he didn't want her there. That night, Evelyn made her decision. She would go to the vineyard, not as a guest, not as a mother, but as a shadow. She would not interfere. She would simply witness. If Michael was happy, truly happy, then maybe she could find peace. But if he wasn't, the thought trailed off, unfinished, dangerous. When she set her dress on the hanger and laid out her shoes, her hands shook with both dread and determination. She whispered into the stillness of the house, "If he won't bring me in, I'll find my own way in." And with that vow, Evelyn prepared herself for the night she would walk unseen into her son's new world. The vineyard shimmered with strings of golden lights, laughter spilling into the night air, the kind of beauty Evelyn had only ever seen in magazines left on doctors' waiting room tables. She stood at the edge of the parking lot, her breath clouding in the cool air, watching sleek cars glide into the gravel drive, their headlights slicing across the manicured rows of grapes. Women in satin dresses stepped out with elegance, men in sharp tuxedos, polished shoes clicking against the stones. Evelyn smoothed the skirt of her thrift store dress and pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. She knew she didn't belong, but that had never stopped her before. A waiter passed by with trays of champagne flutes balanced on silver. Evelyn ducked her head, slipping behind a group of guests as if she were simply one of the servers. Her heart hammered as she moved closer to the main courtyard where the ceremony was unfolding. Music drifted through the air, a string quartet playing something delicate and expensive sounding. She found a hedge near the back of the crowd, its branches thick enough to shield her, and peered through the leaves. There was her son. Michael stood at the altar, tall and handsome, his face glowing with a kind of nervous joy. For a moment, Evelyn forgot to breathe. It was as though she were looking at him as a boy again, the same boy she had held after nightmares, the same boy who once clutched her hand too tightly on his first day of school. Now he stood steady and grown, about to pledge himself to someone else. Vanessa appeared beside him, breathtaking in her lace gown, her veil catching the fairy lights as she moved. Her beauty was undeniable, but so was the coolness in her eyes, the confidence of a woman who believed she had already won. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. She wanted to hate her, but the truth was more complicated, she feared her. The officiant spoke words Evelyn barely heard. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers. A cheer rose from the guests as Michael kissed his bride. Evelyn's tears came then, hot and unrelenting, streaking down her face as the applause thundered in her ears. She pressed a hand over her mouth, muffling the sound of her sobs, willing herself not to break the fragile disguise of invisibility. Around her, guests whispered to one another in tones she couldn't ignore. "I heard his mother isn't here," one woman said, fanning herself with the program. "They don't talk anymore." Another voice chimed in, "She's always been difficult, I think." The words cut deeper than she expected. She wanted to scream that they didn't know her, that they hadn't seen the nights she'd bled her fingers raw to keep her boy clothed and fed, but she stayed silent, shrinking further into the hedge as though it could protect her from judgment. The reception began with music and laughter spilling into the courtyard. Evelyn drifted among the edges, blending with the staff who bustled back and forth carrying plates and clearing glasses. She watched Michael dance with Vanessa, his smile unwavering, his arm around her waist like he had never held anyone else in the world. The sight was both agony and pride twisted into one. As the night deepened, Evelyn moved closer to the tables, her ears catching fragments of gossip. A bridesmaid leaned into Vanessa, her voice carrying just enough. "Did you ever worry his mother would show up?" Vanessa laughed, a sharp sound disguised as a whisper. "Michael's mother? She's not part of this family. She never will be." The words hit Evelyn like ice water poured straight down her spine. For a moment, she swayed, gripping the edge of a table to steady herself. She thought her heart might give out right there among the fairy lights and laughter. Her eyes darted across the crowd, searching for Michael's face. Did he know? Did he approve of such cruelty, or was he simply blind to the woman he had married? As she stared, Michael's gaze swept across the courtyard and landed, just for a moment, in her direction. His smile faltered. His brow knit together, as if something familiar had caught his eye in the shadows. Evelyn froze, her breath lodged in her throat, the possibility hanging in the air like a blade. Had her son just seen her? Evelyn's entire body tensed as Michael's eyes flickered in her direction. For the briefest second she thought she saw recognition there, a pause in his easy smile, the faint crease of confusion on his forehead. Her heart surged, her legs aching to move, to break from the shadows and run to him the way she used to when he fell on the playground or when he stumbled home late and broken-hearted. Every part of her screamed to cross the courtyard, to grab his hand, to remind him she was still here. But her feet stayed rooted. Fear wrapped itself around her ankles like chains. She saw it play out in her mind, the gasps of the guests, the cold stare of Vanessa, the whispers that would ripple through the vineyard if the forgotten mother interrupted the fairy tale. She imagined Michael's voice, sharp and embarrassed, echoing one he'd used so many times as a boy, "Mom, don't embarrass me." Her throat tightened. She couldn't do it. She couldn't risk turning her son's happiest day into a spectacle. So she sank deeper into the shadows, watching as Michael blinked, shook his head faintly, and turned back to Vanessa with a forced smile. The reception swelled around her, music and chatter rising like a tide she could not fight against. Evelyn drifted farther back, her heart still pounding, her hands trembling. She wandered along the vineyard's edge, tracing the string lights with her eyes until they blurred into halos. Her chest ached with a mixture of longing and shame. To be so close, and yet still outside the circle, it was a torment worse than staying home. She found herself standing at the edge of the dance floor just as the first notes of the mother-son dance filled the air. The DJ's voice carried cheerfully, announcing it as a special moment. Evelyn's stomach dropped. A woman she didn't recognize stepped into the spotlight with Michael. She was older, maybe Vanessa's aunt or a family friend, and she took Michael's hand with pride, smiling as though she'd raised him herself. Evelyn pressed her fist to her mouth to keep from crying out. That was supposed to be her dance. Her moment. The one thing she had dreamed about for years, even when Michael was small and marriage felt like a distant horizon. She imagined placing her head on his shoulder, whispering her pride into his ear, reminding him that no matter where life carried him, he would always be her boy. And now she stood outside of it all, watching another woman live her moment as though Evelyn had never existed. Tears welled, hot and unrelenting. She stumbled back, nearly colliding with a waiter carrying a tray of glasses. She mumbled an apology and hurried away, her vision swimming. Her chest felt hollow, her breath jagged, as though something vital had been ripped clean from her. When she reached the far end of the courtyard, she leaned against the wooden fence that marked the edge of the vineyard, gripping it until her knuckles turned white. She tried to breathe, tried to anchor herself, but her thoughts spiraled. Maybe this was her punishment for holding him too tightly all those years. Maybe Michael had grown into a man who no longer needed, or wanted, his mother. She turned back once more, searching for him among the crowd. He was laughing now, holding Vanessa close, the music swelling around them. For an instant, his head lifted, his gaze sweeping the crowd again. His eyes passed once more over the edge of the vineyard where Evelyn stood. This time the hesitation was unmistakable. His smile faltered, his grip on Vanessa's hand slackened. Did he see her? Did he know? The air seemed to thicken, every sound fading except the pounding of her heart. Evelyn held her breath, waiting, terrified of what would happen if their eyes truly met. Michael's smile returned for the cameras, but it was slower this time, thinner around the edges. He posed with Vanessa, with her family, with the groomsmen who slapped his back and handed him champagne, but his eyes kept drifting. He scanned the faces around him as though something, or someone, was missing. Each time his gaze lingered near the edge of the courtyard, Vanessa tugged his arm, pulling him back into the light of her world. Evelyn saw it from her corner, hidden near the catering station. He was unsettled, she could tell. A mother knew her child's expressions, even from a distance, even after years of distance. He was trying to bury it, to smile through the unease, but she recognized the flicker of guilt in his eyes. And for one fleeting moment, it gave her a strange kind of hope. But then Vanessa noticed. Evelyn watched her lean into Michael, her lips brushing his ear, her eyes narrowing just slightly. His posture straightened, his jaw clenched, and he nodded like a soldier accepting orders. Whatever she said, Evelyn couldn't hear it, but she saw the way it smoothed his features, forced his attention back onto her. It was as if Vanessa had built invisible walls around him, walls Evelyn could not enter. The laughter grew louder, the music faster, the night swirling with celebration. Evelyn stepped back, her shoes crunching softly against the gravel path. She no longer felt like a witness but an intruder, trespassing in her son's life. The shame pressed heavier than the night air. She thought of slipping away quietly, of walking back to her car and disappearing into the dark. Maybe no one would ever know she had been here. But then she saw Michael alone for a moment, standing at the bar with a glass in his hand, staring off into the distance as though lost in thought. His face was half lit by lantern glow, half shadowed, and for the first time she thought she saw the boy he used to be, confused, searching, fragile. Her body swayed toward him, her mouth opening before her mind caught up. But before she could take a step, Vanessa appeared again, sliding her arm around his waist, pressing her lips against his cheek with a smile wide enough for the whole courtyard to see. Michael snapped back into place, laughing too loudly, his arm wrapping around her like armor. Evelyn's throat closed. It was too late. He had made his choice. She turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. The vineyard lights dimmed behind her as she moved into the darkness. Her shoes scuffed against the gravel, her cardigan clutched tight against the night air. The sound of music and laughter faded with every step until there was nothing but the rasp of her own breathing and the pounding of her heart. When she reached her car, she gripped the steering wheel but didn't start the engine. Tears blurred the windshield, distorting the fairy lights in the distance into scattered stars. She pressed her forehead against the leather and let the sobs come, shaking her body until her chest ached. And then, somewhere in the middle of her grief, anger sparked. She thought of the sacrifices, the endless nights she had worked herself raw, the years of loneliness endured so Michael could thrive. She thought of the woman who dared to look her in the eye and declare she would never be part of the family. And she thought of Michael himself, standing silent beside that woman, letting it happen. Her tears slowed. Her grip on the wheel tightened. A voice inside her, sharper than she expected, whispered, "If he won't remember me, I'll make sure he never forgets me again." The night stretched around her, silent and infinite, as Evelyn Carter drove away with a new resolve burning in her chest. The following morning, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, her eyes swollen from a night of restless sleep. The house was too quiet, the tick of the clock on the wall almost cruel in its insistence that life moved forward no matter how broken she felt. She poured herself coffee, though her stomach rebelled at the thought of food. She tried to convince herself to let it go. To leave last night where it belonged, in the shadows, in her heartache, in silence. She had always been good at swallowing pain, at pushing through. But the memory of Vanessa's words gnawed at her. She's not part of this family. She never will be. The cruelty of it festered like a wound. When the mail arrived, Evelyn shuffled through it without thought, a grocery coupon, a church newsletter, an electricity bill. And then, her breath caught. There, among the envelopes, was one with Michael's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open, the paper catching at the corners. Inside was a letter, dated nearly 3 weeks earlier. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the words that seemed almost impossible to believe. "Mom, I know things haven't been easy between us. I know I've made mistakes, and maybe I haven't always shown you how much I love you. But you're my mother. I want you there when I marry Vanessa. The wedding is at the vineyard. I hope you'll come. It won't feel right without you." Evelyn's heart stopped. The room tilted. For a moment she thought she might faint, the letter trembling in her hands. He had wanted her there. He had invited her. Her mind spun. How had this letter not reached her before the wedding? She checked the envelope again, her address was correct, the postmark clear. It had been delivered late, inexplicably, as though fate itself had conspired to keep her away. But as she read the words again, slower this time, a darker thought slithered in. The handwriting was Michael's, yes. The sentiment was his, she could hear it in the phrasing. But why had it arrived after the wedding? Why now, when it could do nothing but deepen her pain? Unless, it hadn't been fate. Unless someone had seen the letter and made sure it didn't reach her until it was too late. Vanessa's face rose in her mind, sharp and calculating. The way she had dismissed Evelyn, the way she clung to Michael like possession, the way she spoke of family as if she had the sole power to decide who belonged. Evelyn could almost see her holding the letter, slipping it back into the mailbox only after the wedding had passed. The thought made Evelyn's hands clench until the paper crumpled. Her chest burned, not just with grief but with fury. This wasn't an accident. This was theft. Vanessa had stolen her son from her, stolen her rightful place at the wedding, stolen the last chance for them to stand together before the world. She stood suddenly, the chair scraping back against the floor. The letter shook in her hands, fragile proof of something she had feared all along, that this wasn't Michael's choice. That his silence, his distance, his absence from her life was not entirely his own. And for the first time Evelyn felt something shift inside her. She was no longer simply the mother left behind, the woman too broken to fight. She was a mother wronged. And mothers wronged carried a fire no one could extinguish. Her reflection in the kitchen window startled her, her eyes fierce, her mouth set in a line of resolve. She almost didn't recognize herself. She smoothed the letter carefully, folded it back into its envelope, and placed it in her purse. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof. Evidence. A weapon, if she needed it. The phone sat on the counter, silent as ever. She thought of calling Michael, of demanding an explanation, of reading his words back to him until he couldn't deny them. But another thought, quieter, more dangerous, whispered that she should wait. That a confrontation now would only give Vanessa the chance to spin her lies, to twist the story in her favor. No. Evelyn would wait. She would gather her strength, her truth, and when the time came, she would place it all in front of her son and make him see what had been stolen from them. Her hand steadied as she whispered into the empty kitchen, "This isn't over." And in her heart, she knew she meant it. The next Sunday, Evelyn forced herself to attend church, though her body felt heavy with dread. The whispers started almost immediately. A pair of women in pastel dresses leaned close to one another, eyes flicking in her direction as they murmured. A man she'd known for years offered a thin smile, pity threaded through it, the kind of smile that said he knew. She sat in the pew, her hands folded tightly in her lap, willing herself not to break. The sermon blurred in her ears. Words of forgiveness, of humility, of turning the other cheek, but Evelyn's mind stayed fixed on the letter resting safely in her purse, like a secret talisman only she knew the power of. Forgiveness, she thought bitterly, was for those who hadn't been erased. After service, she slipped out quickly, keeping her head down, but the whispers followed her onto the street. She walked home faster than usual, her cardigan clutched around her, each step echoing with anger. She wasn't imagining it anymore. People knew she hadn't been invited. The shame was becoming public. That night, restless, she logged back onto Facebook. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, tempted to type something, anything, that might reveal the truth. But instead she scrolled through photos of the wedding again, each one a blade cutting deeper. And then she saw it. A comment buried beneath the flood of congratulations, written by a woman she didn't recognize, "So glad Vanessa got exactly the day she wanted." Everything was perfect. The phrasing snagged in Evelyn's mind. Exactly the day she wanted. Not Michael. Not the couple. Vanessa. Her jaw tightened. Slowly, she began to notice more, little details she had overlooked before. The decor screamed of Vanessa's taste, not Michael's. The guest list, heavily weighted toward her side of the family. Even the music, a playlist Evelyn knew Michael would never have chosen on his own. The realization spread through her like cold fire. Michael hadn't been steering this ship. He had been pulled along in its wake. And if Vanessa could control a wedding, what else was she controlling? Over the next week, Evelyn found herself driving by the house Michael had bought with Vanessa, a tidy two-story on the edge of town. She told herself it was coincidence, that she was just running errands nearby, but each time her car slowed at the curb. Curtains drawn. Lights glowing in the kitchen. Sometimes she caught a glimpse of Michael through the window, carrying groceries, tying his tie, laughing with someone just out of sight. Once, she thought she saw him sitting alone in the living room, staring at nothing, a glass in his hand. But before she could look longer, Vanessa entered, and he rose quickly, his smile snapping into place like armor. The sight hollowed Evelyn. He was performing, she realized. Smiling when told, laughing when expected. The boy she raised, the boy with the soft heart and restless spirit, was still in there somewhere, but buried beneath a mask Vanessa seemed determined to hold in place. She gripped the steering wheel until her fingers ached. The letter in her purse felt heavier with each passing day, like it was waiting for her to act. But how? If she stormed into Michael's life now, Vanessa would twist it. She knew it. No, she needed to be careful. She needed to be smart. If she was going to bring her son back to her, she would have to strike at the right time, with the truth undeniable in her hands. For now, she would watch. She would wait. She would gather every detail, every inconsistency, every shadow that Vanessa thought she could hide behind. Because Evelyn Carter was no longer the forgotten mother. She was the quiet watcher. And one day soon, Vanessa would see just how dangerous that could be. The letter burned a hole in Evelyn's purse, a constant reminder of what had been stolen from her. Each time she touched it, the decision pressed harder against her chest. She couldn't keep it hidden forever. At some point, Michael had to know. One Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn picked up the phone. Her hand shook as she dialed his number, each ring tightening the knot in her stomach. At the fourth ring, his voicemail clicked on. His recorded voice, warm, distracted, too casual, filled her ear. "Hey, it's Michael. Leave a message." She froze. What could she possibly say in a few seconds that would pierce through Vanessa's influence, that would make him listen instead of dismissing her? The beat came, sharp and demanding, and all she managed was silence before she hung up. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down. No, not like this. Not in words that could be erased with a press of a button. She needed something undeniable. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with pen and paper, the letter unfolded beside her. She wrote slowly, carefully, choosing words with the precision of a woman who had carried too many unsaid sentences for too long. "Michael, I found your letter. The one you wrote inviting me to the wedding. It came too late. I don't know why. But I know it wasn't by accident." Her pen hesitated, the ink pooling in place. She considered writing Vanessa's name outright but stopped. Not yet. It was too dangerous to accuse without knowing how deep her son's loyalties ran. She continued, "I was there, Michael. I saw you. You looked happy, but also. I know you, my boy. I know when you're pretending. I won't stay silent while I lose you piece by piece. We need to talk. Alone." She folded the note, slid it into an envelope, and addressed it in her careful script. She considered mailing it but shook her head. Too much could happen in transit. Too many hands could intercept it. No, this one she would deliver herself. The following morning, Evelyn drove to Michael's house. Her heart pounded as she walked up the path, clutching the envelope in her hand. The curtains were drawn, the house quiet, but Vanessa's car sat gleaming in the driveway. Evelyn's steps faltered. She couldn't risk Vanessa being the one to find it first. Instead, she slipped around to the back, her shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The yard was tidy, almost sterile, with trimmed hedges and a patio set that looked like it had never been used. She found the side door. Michael's old habit was to use it more than the front, and tucked the envelope into the narrow space between the doorframe and the storm door, where only someone who opened it would see. She lingered for a moment, her fingers pressed against the cool glass. She wanted to knock, to force the conversation, but fear held her back. Instead, she whispered, "Please, Michael. Read it. See me." Then she turned and walked quickly back to her car, her pulse racing. That night, she sat by the phone, waiting. Every ring of silence stretched her nerves tighter. By 10 o'clock, she could no longer sit still. She paced the living room, staring at the framed photos of Michael scattered across the shelves. At 11, her phone finally buzzed. Evelyn nearly dropped it in her rush to answer. "Mom?" Michael's voice, low, uncertain. Her throat closed at the sound. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. A pause. He exhaled. "I got your note." Her heart leapt. He'd seen it. He knew. But before she could speak, another voice came faintly through the receiver, sharp, female, unmistakable. "Vanessa." The sound of her tone, clipped and commanding, made Evelyn's stomach twist. Michael lowered his voice, hurried, almost guilty. "I can't talk now. I'll call you later. Please, just, don't make this worse." The line clicked dead. Evelyn sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, the words echoing in her chest, "Don't make this worse." Worse than what? Sleep abandoned Evelyn that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Michael's words replaying in her head like a broken record, "Don't make this worse." Every syllable carried weight, fear, hesitation, the careful cadence of a man speaking under watch. By morning, she couldn't shake the unease. The letter in her purse proved Vanessa had meddled. Michael's hurried tone proved he wasn't free. Evelyn knew her son. When he was young, he used to confess his troubles in whispered midnight talks at the kitchen table. Now, his silence felt like a prison. She needed to know more. For the first time in years, Evelyn stepped into the public library. The smell of dust and ink clung to her clothes as she settled at a computer. She typed Vanessa's name into the search bar, her fingers trembling. At first, it was harmless: college achievements, charity events, polished headshots. But Evelyn dug deeper, moving past the curated surface, into old newspaper clippings and public records. That's when she found it. An article, nearly a decade old: local businesswoman files restraining order against former fiancé. Vanessa's photo stared back at her, younger but unmistakable. Evelyn's breath caught. She scanned the article, her eyes devouring every word. The fiancé had claimed Vanessa was manipulative, controlling, prone to sudden rages. He had alleged she isolated him from his family, cut off his friendships, and monitored his every move. The judge had dismissed the restraining order due to lack of sufficient evidence, but the accusation lingered like a shadow. Evelyn's pulse raced. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't just a mother clinging to her son. Vanessa had a pattern. She printed the article, her hands shaking as the paper slid warm from the machine. She tucked it into her purse alongside Michael's letter. Proof was building, pieces of a puzzle forming a picture too dark to ignore. On her way home, Evelyn detoured past Michael's house again. She told herself it was coincidence, but her eyes fixed on the windows, searching for signs. Through the gap in the curtains, she caught a glimpse of him at the dining table, his shoulders slumped, his face pale in the lamplight. He looked tired. Older. Not like a newlywed glowing with joy. Her heart ached. She longed to rush in, to pull him into her arms like she used to tell him everything she had found. But instead she stayed hidden, a ghost on the sidewalk, her fists clenched at her sides. That night, she opened a notebook and began to write. She wrote down everything: the lost invitation, Vanessa's cruel words at the wedding, the article, the way Michael's voice had cracked over the phone. Each entry was a stitch in a tapestry of truth, something she could show him when the time was right. But as she wrote, fear crawled beneath her skin. Vanessa was not just cold or dismissive, she was dangerous. Evelyn could feel it now, a certainty in her bones. And if Vanessa had worked this hard to erase her, how far would she go to keep her gone? The phone on the table buzzed suddenly, making Evelyn jump. A text message. Her breath caught as she reached for it, her pulse thundering in her ears. It wasn't Michael. It was from an unknown number. Stop digging. You'll regret it. Evelyn's hands went cold, the phone slipping slightly in her grip. She stared at the words, her reflection warped in the glass screen. Someone was watching her, and for the first time, Evelyn realized this wasn't just about being excluded from a wedding. It was about survival. The message glowed on Evelyn's phone screen long after she should have turned it off. Stop digging. You'll regret it. The words seared into her chest, pulsing with menace. She read them again and again, hoping they would blur into something less sinister, but they remained sharp, undeniable. Her first instinct was to call Michael. To tell him everything, about the letter, the article, the threat. But when she imagined his face, she saw Vanessa standing right behind him, listening, twisting his words before he could even speak. What if the number wasn't even anonymous? What if it was hers? She deleted nothing, took a screenshot instead, and printed it from her old inkjet printer. She added it to the growing folder of proof. Each page thickened the weight of her resolve. But fear was a living thing inside her now. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every car that slowed outside her home made her peer through the curtains. She hadn't felt this hunted since she was a girl, since nights when storms rattled the windows and she swore something lurked in the shadows. Except this time, the threat wasn't imagined. 2 days later, the threat became real. Evelyn returned from grocery shopping to find her front door slightly ajar. Her stomach dropped. She always locked it, always. Heart pounding, she pushed it open. The house looked untouched at first glance. But as she stepped inside, she noticed small details. The envelope with Michael's letter, once tucked neatly into her purse, now lay on the coffee table, unfolded. The notebook where she'd been recording her suspicions sat open, a pen resting across the pages. Someone had been here. Her breath came shallow, her palms slick. She moved from room to room, half expecting to find someone still inside, but the house was empty. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. Just disturbed. A warning. Evelyn sank onto the couch, trembling. Whoever it was wanted her to know they could reach her, that her walls meant nothing. The message was clear: stop, or it will get worse. But instead of extinguishing her resolve, the intrusion hardened it. Fear sharpened into fury. She thought of Michael, trapped in that pristine house with Vanessa's shadow wrapped around him, unaware, or unwilling to admit, how deeply he was being controlled. If Evelyn backed down now, Vanessa won. She stood, her movements jerky, and gathered the folder of evidence. The letter. The article. The text message. She held them in her hands like a shield. Then she pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write again, her handwriting steadier than she expected. Michael, I'm not safe. And I don't think you are either. The words bled onto the page, urgent, final. She folded it, slipped it into an envelope, and tucked it inside her purse. This one she would not leave at his door. This one she would deliver directly, even if it meant facing Vanessa herself. That night, Evelyn parked across the street from Michael's house, her headlights off, her car cloaked in darkness. Through the windows, she could see the glow of lamps, the silhouettes moving inside. Her heart thudded with a mix of terror and determination. She would wait for the right moment, for Michael to step outside, for a sliver of privacy, for even a second where she could place the truth into his hands. But as she watched, she saw Vanessa through the living room window. She was standing close to Michael, too close, her hand on his chest as she spoke. He nodded, his expression tight, his shoulders heavy. Evelyn leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel. The scene looked less like a marriage and more like a negotiation. Her pulse quickened. She thought she saw Michael's eyes flick toward the window again, the same searching look he'd worn at the vineyard. For a heartbeat, she felt he could sense her presence, even across the street, even hidden in the dark. Then Vanessa turned, as if she too felt something. Her gaze cut toward the window, sharp and unblinking. Evelyn froze. For a terrifying second, it felt like Vanessa was staring straight at her car, straight at her. Evelyn ducked down, her breath ragged, her hands clutching the envelope like a lifeline. The war had begun. Evelyn couldn't wait any longer. The letter weighed too heavy in her purse, her fear too loud in her chest. If she didn't act soon, Vanessa would win completely, and Michael would slip beyond her reach forever. On a Thursday afternoon, she drove to his office building. She knew his routine, he had mentioned it months ago in one of their rare conversations. Michael worked late most Thursdays, wrapping up reports while Vanessa attended her yoga classes. Evelyn parked 2 blocks away, her pulse racing as she approached the glass doors. The receptionist barely looked up as Evelyn stepped inside, her cardigan buttoned tight, her hands clutching the envelope. She waited by the elevator, her reflection trembling in the polished metal doors. When they opened, she stepped in, her stomach flipping as the floor numbers climbed. The office hallways were quiet, most employees gone for the day. She followed the light spilling from an open doorway. Michael sat at his desk, his tie loosened, his face weary as he stared at his computer screen. For a moment, Evelyn froze. He looked older than she remembered, the boy she'd raised buried beneath exhaustion. But he was still her son. Her only son. Michael, she whispered. He looked up, startled. His eyes widened. Mom? What are you? How did you? He rose quickly, glancing toward the doorway as if someone might be watching. You can't just show up here. Evelyn's throat ached. She stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. I had to see you. Alone. Just once. Please. His jaw tightened. He rubbed the back of his neck, pacing slightly. If Vanessa finds out. She already knows, Evelyn said firmly. She pulled the envelope from her purse and placed it on his desk. Her hand shook, but her voice did not. This is the letter you wrote. The one inviting me to the wedding. It arrived too late. 3 weeks late. Michael stared at the envelope, his face draining of color. Slowly, he reached for it, his fingers brushing the paper as though it might burn him. He unfolded the letter, scanning his own handwriting. His lips parted, his breath catching. I did send this, he whispered. I wanted you there. I told Vanessa, his voice faltered, his eyes flicking toward the door again. She said she mailed it. She promised she did. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice trembling with both love and fury. She didn't, Michael. She kept it from me. She made sure I wasn't there. She's been cutting me out of your life from the beginning. He shook his head, his hands gripping the letter tightly. No, you don't understand. She wants peace. She thinks you and I are better apart. That's not peace, Evelyn snapped. Her voice cracked with raw emotion. That's control. That's erasure. Don't you see? She's isolating you. Just like she did before. Michael's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. What do you mean before? Evelyn's breath hitched. She pulled the folded newspaper article from her purse and slid it across the desk. I found this. A man tried to get away from her once. He said the same things I'm saying now. That she isolates. That she manipulates. It's a pattern, Michael. He stared at the article, his face a storm of conflict. He shook his head again, but slower this time, weaker. This isn't fair. You don't know her like I do. She's not. Look at me, Evelyn whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm your mother. I've known you every day of your life. And I see you, Michael. I see how tired you are. I see how trapped you look. Tell me honestly, are you happy? The silence stretched heavy between them. His lips parted, his chest rising and falling, his eyes glistening. He opened his mouth as if to answer. And then the office door clicked open. Vanessa stood there, her silhouette sharp against the hallway light, her eyes narrowing as they fell on Evelyn. Michael froze, the color draining from his face. Evelyn's heart thudded. The moment of truth had arrived. The room froze the moment Vanessa's heels clicked against the office floor. Her presence filled the space like a sudden drop in temperature. She didn't speak right away. She simply stood in the doorway, eyes sweeping the scene, Evelyn's trembling form, the envelope on the desk, the unfolded article beside it, and Michael caught in the middle like a deer caught between headlights. Michael, Vanessa said finally, her tone smooth, practiced, laced with steel beneath the softness. What's going on here? Michael stammered, clutching the letter in his hands. It's nothing. Mom she stopped by. I didn't know she was coming. Vanessa's gaze shifted to Evelyn, her smile sharp enough to cut. Of course she did. She stepped farther into the room, her perfume trailing behind her, her posture radiating ownership of the space. Mrs. Carter, we've discussed boundaries before, haven't we? You promised not to interfere. Evelyn's chest heaved, but she refused to shrink. I never promised any such thing. And I will not stand by while you erase me from my son's life. Michael tried to intervene, his hands raised slightly, but Vanessa spoke over him, her voice silken and commanding. Erase you? Evelyn, honestly, you've always been dramatic. I tried to include you. But you make everything harder. Michael doesn't need that kind of stress. Stress? Evelyn's voice trembled with anger. You locked me out of his wedding. You forged silence where love should be. That's not protection, Vanessa, it's control. She jabbed a trembling finger toward the article on the desk. And you've done it before. Michael's eyes flickered toward the paper again, his lips parting. But Vanessa was already moving, smoothly plucking the article off the desk with manicured fingers. She scanned it, her brow arching as if amused. This? Oh, Michael. She's digging up gossip now. Tabloids. Old lies. People will say anything when they're bitter, won't they? She turned her gaze back to Evelyn, her smile widening. Is this really the best you've got? Evelyn stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. I don't need better. Because the truth is written all over your face every time you silence him. Look at him, Vanessa. He's afraid to even speak without your permission. Michael flinched as if the words struck something deep. His eyes darted between them, guilt etched across his features. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might finally say something, finally break through the web Vanessa had spun around him. But Vanessa was quicker. She laid a gentle hand on his arm, tilting her head, her voice turning syrupy. Darling, don't let her get to you. She's lonely. That's all. She's trying to pull you back into old obligations, into guilt. We're building a life now, our life. You don't owe her your peace. Her hand lingered on him, and Evelyn saw it for what it was, not comfort, but a leash. Michael, Evelyn whispered, tears burning her eyes. Please. You don't have to choose between us. I'm not asking for that. I just want to know you're truly happy. Tell me you are. Look me in the eyes and say it. The office went silent, the air taut with expectation. Michael's throat worked as he swallowed hard. He lifted his gaze to his mother's, his lips trembling. For the briefest second, the boy she had raised, the boy who once clung to her hand at school drop-offs, who cried into her shoulder when he scraped his knee, shone through. But then Vanessa's grip on his arm tightened. Her nails dug in, subtle but firm. His gaze broke. I'm fine, Mom, he said softly, his voice hollow. You need to stop this. The words shattered Evelyn's chest like glass. Vanessa's smile returned, victorious. She looped her arm through Michael's and steered him gently toward the door. Come, darling. We should get home. You've had enough excitement for one day. As they passed her, Evelyn stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. But just before he crossed the threshold, Michael's eyes flicked back to hers. For the briefest instant, she saw it, fear, regret, a silent plea buried in his gaze. Then he was gone, led away by the woman who had stolen him. Evelyn was left standing in the fluorescent light, her body trembling, her resolve both broken and hardened all at once. She whispered to the empty room, "This isn't over." The drive home blurred past in streaks of headlights and taillights, but Evelyn barely noticed the road. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her heart still echoing with Michael's hollow words, "I'm fine, Mom. You need to stop this." She replayed the scene again and again. The way Vanessa's nails had pressed into his arm. The way his gaze had flickered to hers, desperate, begging without sound. He couldn't speak freely, not in front of her. That much was undeniable now. By the time Evelyn pulled into her driveway, her grief had hardened into something else. Rage. Determination. The kind that didn't shrink in the face of threats but sharpened against them. If Michael couldn't fight for himself, then she would fight for him. She spent the night at her kitchen table, the folder of evidence spread across the wood. The letter, the delayed invitation. The article about Vanessa's past. The threatening text. Each piece was small, but together they painted a portrait of manipulation, of control, of danger. She knew no one would believe her outright, it would look like the ramblings of a bitter mother, cut out of her son's life. But she also knew the truth, and the truth demanded action. For the first time, Evelyn considered going to the police. She imagined sitting in a station, her trembling hands sliding the folder across the desk. But what would she tell them? That her son's wife was too controlling? That someone had broken into her home but left everything behind? That she'd read an old article in the newspaper? They'd smile politely, maybe offer to keep an eye out, then file it away as nothing. Worse, they might tell Vanessa. And Evelyn couldn't risk that. So she thought differently. If the system wouldn't help, she'd find another way. The next morning, she made a bold choice. She reached out to Mark Henderson, Michael's old college friend, the one Vanessa had always disliked, the one who'd mysteriously stopped coming around once their relationship grew serious. Evelyn hadn't spoken to him in years, but she found him easily enough on Facebook. She typed out a simple message, "Mark, this is Evelyn, Michael's mother. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Please don't tell Michael or Vanessa." She stared at the screen, her finger hovering over send. Then she clicked it. Hours later, a reply pinged back, "Mrs. Carter, I've been waiting for this. Where can we meet?" Her breath caught. Waiting? She read the words again, her pulse quickening. Could it be that Mark knew something too? That he'd seen the same patterns she had, but from another angle? They agreed on a quiet diner off the interstate, the kind of place where no one asked questions. Evelyn arrived early, her folder clutched to her chest, her nerves frayed. She sat in a booth by the window, watching every car that pulled into the lot. When Mark finally walked in, she almost didn't recognize him, older now, broader in the shoulders, but his eyes carried the same warmth she remembered. He slid into the booth across from her, leaning forward, his expression grave. "You're right to reach out," he said quietly, skipping the small talk. "I've been worried about Michael for years. Vanessa, she's not what she seems." Evelyn's chest tightened. "You saw it too?" Mark nodded, his jaw clenching. "That's why we stopped talking. She didn't like me. She told Michael I was toxic, that I was dragging him down. Eventually, he stopped answering my calls. But I never believed it was his choice." "Not really." Evelyn's hands trembled as she slid the folder across the table. "I've been keeping track. Evidence. Proof." Mark flipped through it, his expression darkening with each page. When he reached the threatening text, his lips pressed into a hard line. "This isn't just manipulation anymore. This is intimidation. If she's escalating, Michael could be in danger." The words made Evelyn's breath hitch. Deep down, she had feared it, but hearing it aloud gave it shape, weight, urgency. Mark looked her in the eyes, his voice low and steady. "We need to be smart. If we confront her head-on again, she'll twist it against us. But if we gather enough evidence, if we expose her the right way, she won't be able to hide." Evelyn nodded, her pulse racing. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. But just as hope began to kindle, a shadow fell across the table. Evelyn looked up, and froze. Vanessa stood at the entrance of the diner, her eyes locked on them. The diner air went still, thick with grease and coffee and sudden dread. Vanessa stood framed in the doorway, her tailored coat draped across her shoulders like armor, her eyes narrowed into icy slits. For one awful second, Evelyn felt like prey caught in the open, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Mark's posture stiffened, his hand curling into a fist on the table. He leaned forward and whispered, "Stay calm. Don't let her see you rattled." But Evelyn was rattled. Her heart thudded painfully, her fingers twitching toward the folder between them. Vanessa's gaze flicked down, saw the papers, and a flicker of something, anger, recognition, maybe fear, crossed her face before her mask snapped back into place. She crossed the diner floor slowly, each heel clicking against the tile, her presence magnetic and suffocating. Conversations hushed around them, forks paused halfway to mouths. When she reached the booth, she didn't ask permission, she slid into the seat beside Mark, her perfume sharp and suffocating. "Well," Vanessa said smoothly, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Isn't this cozy?" Evelyn swallowed hard, forcing herself upright. "We were just talking about me?" Vanessa finished for her, her gaze burning into Evelyn's. "Because I can see my name written all over those papers." She reached out as if to grab the folder, but Mark's hand landed on it first, firm, protective. "Not yours to take," he said evenly. Vanessa's eyes snapped to him, and for a moment, her polished facade cracked. "Still meddling, Mark? I should have known. You never could keep your nose out of Michael's business." "His business," Mark shot back, his voice low and dangerous, "isn't supposed to mean cutting out his family, his friends, everyone who cares about him. That's not marriage, Vanessa. That's a cage. Evelyn's breath caught. The diner had grown so quiet she could hear the buzz of the neon sign outside. Patrons pretended to look away but couldn't help sneaking glances, drawn into the silent war unfolding at the booth. Vanessa leaned closer, her smile hardening. You think you're helping him? You're not. Michael is finally free of all the voices that pulled him down, made him weak. I'm the one who gave him structure. Purpose. Without me, he'd still be that indecisive little boy, lost in everyone else's expectations. The word sliced through Evelyn, but she forced herself not to flinch. She looked straight into Vanessa's eyes, her voice trembling but strong. You didn't free him. You bound him. And you're terrified the truth will come out, that's why you keep erasing anyone who might remind him who he really is. For a second, Evelyn thought she'd gone too far. Vanessa's smile faltered, and her hand curled into a fist on the tabletop. Then, just as quickly, she recovered, her voice sweet and mocking. Oh, Evelyn. Always the martyr, always the victim. You're just upset he chose me over you. Evelyn's voice cracked but held steady. No. I'm upset he's disappearing in front of us, and you're the one pulling him under. Mark shifted the folder closer to himself, his eyes never leaving Vanessa's. You can smile all you want, but this, he tapped the papers, isn't going away. People are going to see who you really are. For the first time, Vanessa's composure wavered, her jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with something raw and dangerous. She stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the tile. Careful, she hissed. You don't know what you're playing with. She turned on her heel and strode out of the diner, her exit as commanding as her entrance. The door swung shut behind her with a final, chilling slam. Evelyn sat frozen, her hands trembling. Mark exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging. She knows, he muttered. We've crossed the line. She's not going to let this slide. Evelyn clutched the folder to her chest, her voice barely above a whisper. Then we can't either. Outside, through the diner window, Evelyn caught a glimpse of Vanessa's car pulling away into the night. For just a moment, she thought she saw the faint glow of a phone screen lighting her face, already dialing, already plotting. The war had gone public. The days after the diner felt like the silence before a storm. Evelyn slept little, ate less, every creak of her house carrying menace. She kept the folder beside her at all times, as if proximity alone could keep her safe. Mark checked in often, their whispered calls charged with both fear and strategy. But then, an opening. Michael called. It was late evening, his voice a hushed whisper over the line. Mom? I don't have much time. Can you meet me? Her heart nearly stopped. Michael, where? When? Tomorrow. The old church near Willow Creek. Noon. His voice broke. Please, don't tell anyone. And then the line went dead. Evelyn clutched the phone, her breath shuddering. For the first time, he had reached out. He wanted to see her. Maybe he was ready. Maybe the walls Vanessa built were finally cracking. The next day, Evelyn arrived early. The church was nearly abandoned now, its paint peeling, the stained glass fractured but still beautiful when the sun struck it. She sat in a pew near the front, hands clasped tight, the folder resting beside her. When Michael entered, she rose immediately. He looked gaunt, his eyes shadowed, his suit wrinkled as if he hadn't slept in days. But when he saw her, something softened. He hurried forward, pulling her into a quick, desperate embrace. Mom, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I'm so sorry. Tears blurred her eyes. You don't need to apologize. Just tell me you're ready. Ready to get out. He pulled back, shaking his head. It's not that simple. She has everything. The finances, the house, my accounts. She tracks my phone, my emails. I don't even know what's mine anymore. If I leave, I lose everything. You won't lose me, Evelyn said fiercely. You never will. She pressed the folder into his hands. This is proof. We can use it. You're not trapped. Michael's hands trembled as he flipped through the papers. He lingered on the article, the threatening text. For a moment, Evelyn thought he believed, truly believed. But then the church doors creaked open. Vanessa. She stepped inside, her heels striking the wooden floor, her silhouette framed by the sunlight pouring through fractured glass. Her gaze fell on them, her expression unreadable. So this is where the little rebellion meets, she said softly. How touching. Michael stiffened, clutching the folder like contraband. Vanessa. Don't, she snapped, her voice cutting through the sanctuary. You think I don't know? You think I haven't seen the late-night messages, the diner meetings, the scheming? Her gaze cut to Evelyn, cold and sharp. You just couldn't let him go, could you? Evelyn stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. I'm his mother. I don't have to let him go. Vanessa's laugh was soft, bitter. You mistake control for love. You always have. Michael isn't your little boy anymore, he's my husband. Mine. And you, she pointed at Evelyn, her voice rising, you are nothing but a ghost he should have buried years ago. Michael's face twisted, torn between fear and fury. Stop it, he said, his voice breaking. Just stop. But Vanessa pressed on, her tone honeyed again, turning back to him. Darling, you know what she's doing. She wants to drag you back into her loneliness, her bitterness. Everything we've built, our peace, it'll vanish if you let her in. Evelyn's tears spilled, but her voice rang clear. Michael, listen to me. You called me. Not her. You reached out because somewhere inside, you know the truth. Look at me. Please, look at me. Michael's chest heaved, his eyes darting between them. For a long, agonizing moment, silence hung heavy in the church. Then, slowly, he turned to his mother. I'm not fine, he whispered. His voice shook, but the words carried. I haven't been fine in a long time. Vanessa's face went white. Michael. But he held up a hand, cutting her off. His shoulders squared, his voice steadying. You've been controlling me. I didn't want to see it. I thought it was love, but it's a leash. And I'm done. The air split with the declaration. Vanessa's composure shattered, her mask crumbling into raw rage. You ungrateful, after everything I've done for you. She lunged toward him, but Evelyn stepped between them, her frail frame blocking the path with surprising strength. Enough, Evelyn said. Her voice, though quiet, echoed through the sanctuary like thunder. Vanessa stopped, trembling with fury, her eyes wild. She looked from Michael to Evelyn, then back again, realizing, for the first time, that she had lost. Mark appeared then, stepping in from the church doorway. Evelyn hadn't known he'd followed, but relief surged through her veins. He moved swiftly, pulling out his phone. It's all recorded, he said firmly. Every word. Vanessa's eyes widened. You. But Michael spoke first. His voice was calm, resolute. Leave. Before I call the police. This is over. For a moment, Vanessa looked ready to fight, to claw her way back into dominance. But then something flickered in her eyes, fear, recognition of defeat. Without another word, she turned sharply and stormed out of the church, her footsteps fading into silence. The echo lingered long after she was gone. Michael sagged, dropping the folder onto the pew. He pressed his hands to his face, his shoulders shaking. Evelyn reached for him, and this time, he didn't pull away. He folded into her embrace like he had as a boy, his tears dampening her shoulder. I'm so sorry, Mom, he whispered. You don't have to be, Evelyn murmured, holding him tight. You're free now. That's all that matters. Sunlight streamed through the cracked stained glass, casting fractured rainbows over them. It wasn't perfect, it would never be perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in years, Evelyn felt hope. The wedding had excluded her. But the truth, at last, had brought her son back. And that was the day Evelyn Carter finally stopped being forgotten.